The intention as we were designing this, the agenda here, was to build, and I hope you've seen sort of the build and the sort of the thinking that's gone into this. And so what we want to do today, and particularly the next panel here, is expose you to some cases, some examples of actually taking the pilots to scale. Right? There's a lot of work going on across the country, in counties and jurisdictions, and a lot of piloting work. And one of the things we wanted to really try to do is sort of focus on what it looks like and what it takes to both build something out into a large-scale implementation, and on one end of the spectrum, on the other end of the spectrum, how do you prepare the foundation to do that in an intelligible, intelligent way, as opposed to just sort of diving into the job. And I think today what we have, both with Linda and Dr. Secretary V, as your official title is now, no, sorry, you're not going to be able to walk away from that one. I think both representatives today will really present sort of a provocative approach to how we make that happen. And so bios are in your materials. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I've had a little bit of chance to sort of work with Linda over the years from work we had done in Administration for Children's Services in New York, and I'm just delighted that she's able to come back. She was here, I think, 4 years ago, the first or second conference.
I think also it was in a small Victorian building.
Yes.
And small rooms.
Yes.
The measure of your success is
the vaulted ceilings. And it's been a real pleasure to work with you and some of your staff over the last number of months, really getting to know and learn about what's going on there. And to sort of meet you over the last couple of days and understand the passion and interest that you bring to this, and just a real commitment to the work.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. Well, first, I'd like to thank Dan for inviting me. It's been quite an adventure for us coming up and participating in this. It's learning. Now, I just need to be perfectly clear. I am a recovering orthopedic surgeon. On Saturday, I will have been out of my practice for exactly 1 year. 1 year, because I got the job in January, and I had to wind down. I had 4 days' notice that I was going to do this job, and so I had to kind of wind down. Well, we can meet you out there. It's nice that, people always say, well, how are you doing, Bill, in your new job? Do you like it? And it's, yes, I like it, but how am I doing? I don't know. In my old job, I could almost tell from minute to minute, in patient to patient, how I was doing. I knew I was going to help. I was not, or whether we had a complication, but I knew. In this job, I suspect it'll be years before we actually know how we've done, and that's very hard. But I come to this a little bit by way of travelogue. I was on the board of the AMA and got very interested in health policy. And what we know and are accused of in medicine is just fragmented care. Nobody talks to each other. And I tell the story of my mother as she and my father were preparing for their 50th wedding anniversary. She began having pain here, right upper quadrant pain. Does anybody know what right upper quadrant pain means? Some gallbladder. All right, any of you doctors? But it's your gallbladder, right? So what happens to Mom? She calls me, and on the phone, her orthopedic son says, Mom, it's your gallbladder. If this continues, you're going to need to have your gallbladder out. And so we get through the anniversary, and she goes to the primary care doctor. Now, Mom lives out in the country, so she has to drive a long ways to get to the doctor. And the doctor says, Ms. Hazel, it's probably your gallbladder. So what happens next? She goes to the hospital in another town, where she gets tests, and the computer reads the EKG. That clinical decision-making done by computers is not informed, because it doesn't know that she has no heart history in the family, that this is probably her EKG. When you look at the statistics, a normal distribution out 95% confidence levels, you're going to get 2.5% at either end that are outliers, right? So the computer doesn't know that she's fine. But she goes back to the primary care doctor, who says, you're going to need to go to the cardiologist. So she goes to the cardiologist. And the guy calls me up and says, Bill, he says, this is not a HIPAA violation, because your mother said I can talk to you. She's fine. She's going to be perfect. But anesthesia won't put her to sleep without a treadmill. So she gets back. Did I say she lives out in the country? And she drives. Now, get the treadmill. And then she goes back to the cardiologist, who calls me a few days later and says, Bill, your mom's fine, just like we thought. Go meet the surgeon. And so, all right, now we're getting to business. And by the way, Mom is suffering all this time. She's having regular attacks from her gallbladder. She is uncomfortable. She is miserable. And have you all noticed that when you go from doctor to doctor, it takes time to set up these appointments? You don't get in right away? You ever hear about that? And then yeah, you do? Okay, that's not just a Virginia thing. Now what she also says, and darn it, every place we go, they give me this stack of papers, and I got to do it all again, every single time. And even by now, with just this little back and forth, we're having trouble getting the records from one place to another. Now, what I need to tell you is two pieces of information. One is my grandfather was a surgeon. He trained at Mayo. He was general practice, and he went to Mayo from 42 to 44 during the war, and then he came out and was a general surgeon. That will be for later. And the second thing I need to tell you is that I was chief of staff of the hospital. I'm a big shot. I can work it out, right? I just want you to know this. So I'm working it out. I'm helping. With help like mine, you don't want help. So Mom goes on a Thursday to see the surgeon. Any of you would go to this guy? Any of you would let this guy do your surgery? Great guy. And he comes in and he says, Bill, he says, your mom needs her gallbladder out. No question. I said, thank God we're getting someplace. But, the technology's changed. We could do this with a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. It's a lot easier. Back in my grandfather's day, that would have been a big surgery. I remember in training, holding the liver, 6 to 8 weeks of recovery. It's really, he says, but in order to do that, we're going to need to get a test. We're going to need to get an ERCP. And this is he's talking to me again. It's right at 11:30 in the morning on Thursday. I remember it. So at 4:30, my dad calls me. And this is one of those memorable moments. And he says, Bill, where's your mother? And I said, I don't know. I said, the guy was going to send her over. He said he had already called this other doctor who was going to work her in this afternoon. Well, she's not home. Where is your mother? She says, don't any of you want to take care of her? You just keep sending her all over the place. Doesn't anybody want to take care of her? Your grandfather would have had this gallbladder out a month ago, and she's suffering. And he was really upset. I can't actually use the words he was using because this is a public audience and it's being videotaped. But it says, y'all don't want to take care of her. And so finally she gets back. So the next day he calls me and it's 11 o'clock. And he is fussy. He says, is somebody going to take her gallbladder out? That wasn't exactly what he said. But something to that extent. And the problem now was she needs the CRCP, which requires general anesthesia. It has to be done at the hospital or center. And for some reason, it can't be done at the same time you get your gallbladder out. Now, I have my own theories. I'm not a general surgeon. If there are any general surgeons in the room who'd care to correct me, I'd like to know. But what happened here is that you've got a procedure that is done separately. There's possibly some medical basis for this. There is a possibility of real legal issue with doing them simultaneously because if you leave a stone behind and get elevated pancreatic enzymes, you're going to be hearing from the lawyers. That's one thing. But probably the issue is you don't get paid to do them at the same time because it's two different doctors on the same day, and the hospital doesn't get paid for the two procedures. So Dad's saying, do it. So I'm going to do the best I can, Dad. I'm really helping now, okay? And so we call him, can't do it. It's got to be done this way. And why is it? Orthopedic reason number one is this is the way we always do it. It obviously applies to general surgeons, too. And I learned that early on. Why do you do it that way? This is the way we always do it. Well, why don't you do it this way? We don't do it that way. That's orthopedic reason number two. And just for the record, orthopedic reason number three as well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. But the point here is she goes in on Tuesday and has the ERCP, and at quarter of 6, I am with the chief executive of the hospital, Nova Hospital System, top 50 system. Everybody's heard about it, and we are having a conversation. And my father calls, and this time the language was not colorful. Dad, Bill, something's wrong. Your mother's on the floor and she is in pain. Can't you take care of her? I said, Dad, bring her to the emergency room. got her to the emergency room. The partner of the gastroenterologist saw her. The partner of the general surgeon saw her that night at 9 o'clock and said, Ms. Hazel, you need your gallbladder out. We can do this at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock the next morning, she went in, she had her surgery, she did fine, went home, never had a bit of trouble. So the moral of that story is when you have a crisis, just go to the emergency room. You know, it's a lot easier. But that's clearly what now we're saying is not good care. Now, what I have noticed, it is not high-value care. Okay, I don't see that there's any cost effectiveness to it with all these transition. There are quality issues. And the fact is, it's not really very compassionate either. So why am I telling you that story? Last Friday night, I spoke at a planning retreat for a residential facility that's going through the throes of what do we do now as we put kids into least restrictive environments. And our business is suffering, and what does it take to move? We had a lot of social workers and education people around, and some of the kids that had been through this program in the room, and I said, how many of you all feel like you get from one place to the other to the other? And all the kids are putting their hands up and nodding. And when you get to that next place, is there ever any record that you were at the first place? No. We have to go. Do they talk to each other? Mm-mm. Same thing. It's a direct analogy. Direct analogy. So where we come into this in Virginia is that we have another little peculiarity. We started with health information technology a couple years ago by creating something called the HITS Act, Health Information Technology Standards Advisory Committee, and one of the folks on HL7 is on that to set up standards for data interchange. This preceded me, previous administration. Then we set up something called the HITECH, the Health Information Technology Advisory Council, which was charged with figuring out how we're going to do health information exchange in Virginia. And I had been appointed to that by the previous governor, so I was actually involved in that. And suddenly I went from being a member of the panel to the chair of the panel when I get to be secretary. Now, we have then the PPACA is in its works. And while that's happening in Virginia, you all may have heard the rumor that Virginia doesn't like the PPACA. Did y'all hear that? Yeah, 4 bipartisan bills last year in the General Assembly basically said, nope, we're not going to do this. And it gets signed by the president in March, and the governor says, Bill, it says, the law is the law. We're going to follow the law, even while we'd like to see it changed. So, does anybody want to trade jobs, by the way? It's not. So the point is that you come in with this medical background, and I start meeting with the people in the social service and all the agencies. It's like this. These 13 silos that I inherited don't talk to each other. The HR people don't meet together. The IT people don't meet together. The finance people don't. That doesn't happen in your state, does it? No? We're unique that way? Yeah, it's you've heard this story before. Is that what you're acknowledging? Okay, I thought you were disagreeing with me. So getting the IT people together and realizing we're spending $60 million plus a year on information technology that can't track a behavioral health patient across the state as we go from one of what we call CSBs to the next CSB to the next CSB. Can't happen. I can't tell you how many discrete individuals we have. We can look at Medicaid data, but we can't do it that. And then there's that other business about how we do the care coordination. I really believe that doing things the same way, either in medicine, the delivery system, what happened to my mom shouldn't happen. I don't believe. Shouldn't happen. It's embarrassing as a physician to tell you that. The board of the AMA going around the country, and this is the best we can do in 2011, I don't think so. And so when I hear the social workers sit down and talking about how to take care of kids, they sound like surgeons to me. This is what you do. Why? Because this is the way it's done. Why? Well, we don't do it any other way, and those who do are wrong. Does that ever happen in your agencies? No, it's not just my impression. So the point is, how do we inform those discussions? So basically what we're trying to do is develop the tools, and we have this unique thing. We have the health information technology that requires client identification. How can we use that process in everything we do? We have this issue with the PPACA in Virginia. We've seen an increase in Medicaid enrollments. We're now over 900,000. When I got the job, it was 35 to 900,000. The governor's probably going to fire me if I can't do better than that. But and you all probably heard we've got budget problems too. SNAP benefits now, we processed 1.1 million people for SNAP benefits last year. Those numbers are up, and all these things are coming up. Our social service agencies had 5% cuts last year. So we've got people waiting in line, sitting on the floors, trying to get through a process which is essentially not automated for eligibility. And then the PPACA says, you know, we're going to get a minimum of 275,000 newly eligibles under Medicaid. And you want to know what keeps the secretary awake at night? How are we going to pay for it? Who's going to take care of them? And how are we going to process these people? And so the eligibility determination becomes issue. So the question then is, can we extend that to social service? And so the process we've gone through included, talking to Nancy Andeparla and talking to Rick and others about how we can do it. And then our techies come and say, well, there's this thing called MIDA, this architecture that we can use so we don't have to rip and replace, and we can begin to build on the MIDA. So we say, and then the eligibility, the 90% money we've got for health information technology. The other thing that no one's thinking about is this health benefit exchange. We're going to have to somehow find a way to subsidize people up to 400% of the federal poverty level, which in Virginia could, if with the plan, the incentives and disincentives, could bring 1 million people out of insurance in the business over into the health benefit exchange. So in addition to the 1.1 we're already processing, we're going to have to somehow to verify, authenticate, and determine benefits for another 1 million people. And what I'm envisioning is that we will do this through the same system. We'll get your information, we will send it to the federal data hub that Joel Areo is trying to get set up, and then we will forward some sort of certificate to the health benefit exchange saying this is what an individual's eligible to receive. But that's like doubling the number of transactions that we have to do. And did I mention we have budget problems in our social service offices? So how do you give them the tools that they need? And so what we're envisioning here is creating a citizen-centric portal. And we are in the process of doing that. We have contractors now working in the Department of Social Service to create the portals. We've extended that for the various programs. The next question is when someone comes to you, how do we know it's you? And in our case, the best option that we had was the Department of Motor Vehicles. They had a project called CSI, Customer Service Initiative. And CSI, the theme song from CSI is Who Are You? Right? Well, when we need to know who you are, what we are planning to do is go to the DMV, send a signal over and be authenticated with various levels of certainty, and then come back so you can dig deeper into the system. And that's the method that we're intending to use. We believe that we will be able to fund that with the 90% rule that we're working at. But that'll be the job so we can do that. That will ultimately, there's a governance issue. Will that be part of DMV early, or will that be a shared service? Because when I talk to my education counterparts, they say, we want a lifetime learning record. You could use that. The Virginia Employment Commission needs to be able to use these things too. So we are using, frankly, this 90% opportunity to get a shared service that the Commonwealth can use. We also have extended, I told you about that high tech that did the data standards. They have been commissioned to set standards in Virginia for the entire social service arena, and it's headed by a guy named Marshall Ruffin, who was CIO of UVA, but he's just moved to Inova, the group there has done a really good job. But our plan will be to use the customer as much as possible for data entry, let the workers become social service people. They inform with the knowledge of what an individual is eligible for. You put it through the rules engine. In an ideal, they'll come up. We will know when an individual touches us when they get to a person, what they are eligible for. Then we'd like to eventually put a care management system on top of the bus, and then do the informatics we need to help manage the care better. So our transitional step is there, and then hopefully at some point we'll be able to get to something that looks like this, which will have ties with you will use the master patient index client identifier, however we do it, from the health information exchange will be the same one that we are using internally. we will use the same technology, being able to reach into agencies and pull up in real time the information you need at the point of contact. So it's a simple concept, I know, but there's a lot of blocking and tackling and executing the details. And in medicine, they refer to orthopedists as really brute force and awkwardness, and that's probably what it's going to be to an extent too. But this is sort of our strategy for getting us where we need to be with an enterprise vision for health and human resources. And turn it over to the mayor, who can tell us how she's already done this. So thank you.
I actually thought when Bill was giving his travel log, I remembered back on what got us started in New York. So I'm a deputy mayor. I oversee health, human service, and criminal justice agencies. So on the criminal justice, it's not the police function, but corrections, probation, juvenile justice. And I came to that job in the second term of the Bloomberg administration. And I've worked in city government my entire career, so it's 26, 27 years, the last 15 of which have been in the human services. So 6 years at the Administration for Children's Services doing child welfare work, 4 years at the Department of Homeless Services doing homeless work, and then coming to City Hall. When I was in the first 4 years of the Bloomberg administration, I was running the homeless agency. And a team of commissioners, mostly human service commissioners and housing agency commissioners, were getting together regularly. And we said, we want to get past the crisis, and we want to collaborate across agencies so that we can have a family and client-centered approach where we deal with the whole family, we deal with the holistic situation. We don't just deal with the crisis in front of us. And we worked for 4 years to try to figure out ways to help our frontline workers do that, and we failed. And the reason we failed is not that we didn't have the commitment or the big ideas, but we couldn't figure out in real time how to let frontline workers know that they were individually involved in the same client's life. We didn't have any technology to back it up. So when I went over to City Hall, to my current position, it really created a moment. There had not been a human services deputy preceding me. This was a new position. And it really created a moment to bring all of that collaborative goodwill of the many agencies together to think about, can we now collectively invest our technology resources and create this capacity. And then I would say on a more personal level, much more akin to the type of very traumatic experience like Bill had, when I was at Homeless Services, I had a young client, a young man with 2 adolescent children come in to apply for shelter. And it's pretty rare for a guy to come in with kids to shelter. It's, it's a system that is mostly of single moms and young kids. So this is an odd case, a man with 2 teenage kids. And so, needless to say, our helping hand is to force him to demonstrate that these are his kids and he has legal custody. And the way we do that is we tell him, you cannot complete an application until you give us your birth certificates, until you give us the court orders demonstrating your legal custody of these children. And he didn't have them in his pocket. And so we said, okay, we're going to put you up for one night in a hotel. You come back the next day to complete your application. He does that. He comes back the next day. This is a time when applying for shelter took, on average, 2.5 days, even for your run-of-the-mill case. And then he didn't succeed the 3rd day, but we were helpful. We gave him a free Metro card so that he could schlep off to the court. You know, it was very generous of us. We did our social work thing. We said, we're going to help you. We're going to pay for your subway. Go to the court. Go get your court documents. Go to the Department of Health and get your your birth certificates. And so they come around the 3rd day, and he's still gathering up his documents by running around the subway system. And there was some history of mental illness in the family, both the dad and the son. And the son was traumatized by all of this, and he committed suicide. And it just really shook me, because not that I created this guy's homelessness, not that I was at fault for having he and his son both have untreated or untended to mental illness, but because when he reached out for help, our system and our process further traumatized them in a point of crisis. And so that was real, so we probably all have stories like that, but that was really very unsettling to me, and so sort of pushed me that extra measure to say, if we're not using our resources, our time, our effort to really make a difference when the technology is smart enough, when the political will can be there, if we just ask for the support, when we collectively say we want to make this happen, if we don't get past all those nitpicky barriers that get in the way of doing collaborative case management systems that can make all this stuff available at the push of the button, then we're wasting the very reason that we're in our jobs. So that was a big. So it was great. It was great because it helped to really draw attention to really put a very fine point on the importance of all of this. And so what we did is develop a very, this is the first word I would say around why I think we've had some success, is that it is a very collaborative, very owner-invested project. So of the 17 different agencies that are participating, it is really their project. It is owned and operated in work groups and in governance structure that is not top-down, do it because I said so driven, but very much bottom-up, owner-driven. And so we pulled together a roadmap for what we call HHS Connect. That was published in 2007, about a year into my tenure as deputy mayor, that really laid out this vision for what we wanted to do in federating our technologies of our multiple agencies. It's interesting. I don't know. So the roadmap itself is comprised. Well, the roadmap is our sort of our charter document, our directions to ourselves about where we want to go. In terms of actually managing the project, one of the really critical things to me has been that we have an executive steering committee that is comprised of all the member agencies, and it's really like a full-fledged board of directors that is the governance body that tells, in a way, even though I kind of chair it, tells me and then in turn tells Izzy, who's the director of HHS Connect, what to do. And so we have a rule for our meetings that it's principals only. It's the commissioners, and if you as commissioner can't come, you're not going to send your deputy. Your deputy's not going to send his chief of staff. The chief of staff is not going to send her special assistant. It's commissioners only. If you don't make it, your agency is not represented. And so as a result, we have a very high level of attendance and by the heads of the agencies. And we encourage them not to be passive participants. We send them the materials in advance. We say, here's the agenda, here are the decision points, and you've got to, we don't take official votes, but we really look for okays each step along the way. And so it's it's an intention to build a governance structure for the project that continues to reinforce and deepen the ties of each of the member organizations to this collective. Because ultimately, they're giving up control of a good portion of their IT operations. And that's a big deal. And if any commissioner in their right mind would never give up control of any resource, because nobody else is going to pay attention to your issues as much as you're going to pay attention to your issues. And with this, we had both the drive of that original vision around why that the longer-term holistic solution couldn't be achieved, and so incorporating that into their own internal agency goals, and then in turn, while allowing them really to loosen up on their control of their IT, because there's no way to get to the broader, bigger, longer-term vision without really conceding some of that authority. We have an executive order that shows that the mayor's serious about it. And we made everybody sign a charter. We have a charter, and we had this very public signing where it went around the room, and every commissioner had to sign the charter committing to the project and its goals and purposes. So there's the governance. So the commissioners are up there in the orange. Izzy and his team and our IT partners operating under contract are there in the blue. And then down below in the green is on the left-hand side the sort of the participation of all the agencies and all of the deliverables, the foundational pieces in the center, and then some case management pieces. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. So one of the things with the roadmap is that once we got our hands on everybody's money, then we said, well, now we need to make our customers happy, right? And so the last thing I could do is have commissioners walking off the job because I wasn't delivering and meeting their needs. And so we really structured the roadmap to have some quick wins that would function in real times for agencies. And so some of those things, so for instance, a client portal. You saw in the original vision, the goal was that this would be very client-centric, and if we think about how are we structuring this, it's such that a client can have their own file, can manage their own information. Once they give that information in once, then it loads in, and then everybody else gets it. And so the functions that we provided to the clients were some online applications. Now, online applications often means you go online, you fill out the form, you print out the form, then you take the subway down to the office to hand it in and meet, right? So that's not, we wanted to do real, legit online applications. And so for starters, we got free school lunch and SNAP, and Medicaid renewals, senior citizen rent increase exemption, and disability rent increase exemption applications online. So you do data enter it online, but then you push the button and it delivers to to whatever, hopefully an iPad of some worker who then processes and reviews and checks and I got to keep my iPad yesterday because I actually had delivered an iPad out to some workers, so I faked it. So we had some quick deliverables for the clients because we wanted the clients in the community, and we wanted our nonprofit partners and our community partners to actually use this thing and to get some real benefit to themselves. The second thing, now it's a little bit of does 2 years, 3 years in the making count as a quick win? I suppose in some worlds it does. In the IT world, it's becoming laughable. But it was a huge quick win to get our worker portal up. I'm going to say a little bit more about that because that's a very exciting thing that I think is a little bit of the vision of this conversation. And the worker portal means that as a worker, you can enter the name of a client, and so say you're that homeless services worker, and the family comes in, you can enter that family's name, and everything all of our participating agencies know about that client automatically populates the screen. And it includes everything from family composition to income to address to history of address. And importantly, it taps you into a repository of documents, the primary source of which is our social services TANF agency, where we have millions of documents, including birth certificates, Social Security cards, leases. We have huge amounts of information. So now that homeless services worker has that as soon as the name is given at the front door. Key to doing that, moving down on the left-hand side, is the Common Client Index. I don't know how it works. All I know is that now, for everybody that has ever touched any of the participating agencies, we have identified you with your own unique client index, and there's some kind of really complicated algorithmic methodology that says that the Linda Gibbs LYNDA is the same as Linda Gibbs LINDA is the same as Linda Gibb without the S, because there's enough checks to determine that I got enough things going on that makes me the same person, collapses that all into one file and creates the summary. And so it's brilliant and it's unbelievable, and I don't understand it. Federated document management, I told you, everybody's documents gets thrown into this one big bucket and is available. There it is, 32 million. And enterprise case management, I think this is what people mean when they say rip and replace. We decided not to rip and replace, that what we needed to do to really get somewhere quick is to federate all our existing systems. So we just built sort of the translation services between all of the disparate systems, and then those translation services allow it to come out into some new universal common language. Over time, we are, as we build replacement systems for the bits and pieces across all these agencies, we're adopting a common case management system. And each time we build somebody, so right now, if we do an application piece for homeless services, we're doing it in a way in the standard case management approach that then can become that sort of application eligibility use function for all the agencies. So we're gradually over time in replacement systems building this common case management approach. I'll let you can imagine all these things. Maybe I'll say a little something about the biggest issue, confidentiality, further a couple slides down here. So the Worker Connect, I think you have the idea of it there, the Common Client Index, the document management. I have all these brilliant notes here that I'm now talking too fast to actually remember, so hopefully you'll ask me a question about some brilliant note I'm forgetting. And the document management, really, really critical. So 10 agencies are currently, we're also building, there's a little bit of a rule. So why not talk about confidentiality for a second now? The answer is no. Right? No, you can't share documents. No, you can't even ask to share my document. I think you're violating a law there, even if you ask. No, even if you don't give, even if you have security to protect my document and it only flows, and your stuff goes to me, but my stuff doesn't go to you, just by connecting the wires, we have violated another law. And the myth is bigger than the reality, but the reality is also there. And so what we've tried to do is really understand and respect all of, not just the letter of the law, but the concerns that go behind the intent of the law. I mean, there have been, just terrific abuses to people who suffer all kinds of ailments, whether that's, mental illness or HIV, and those are real social conditions, and confidentiality laws are meant to protect them. And at the same time, they have been way overblown. And at the same time, everybody remembers what you can't do, but nobody remembers what you can do. And in fact, people don't often recognize what you're mandated to do. So what we did is we just trudged through this stuff, one by one, phrase by phrase, word by word, and we just knocked it off. And we got every lawyer in the room. Well, we locked them in a room where we didn't have to go into, and right, it was like, you'd stay over there, I'm not going. And we just let people just work it through with a very driven manager, Barb Cohen, who was here yesterday, and a team. We got all the lawyers from all the agencies, and I think our breakthrough moment is when we got the city's chief lawyer on this in our corporation counsel's office became a no to a yes. She actually, in the course of this conversation, became a believer in the importance of the venture and started to use more of her sort of positive thinking on approaching this. And we've got a tremendous compendium of knowledge on that. And then we said, okay, path of least resistance. Let's just, we're federating all this stuff, but then as we share and we put it out there, let's just take the no-brainer stuff where everybody says, yes, 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 all consensus, that can be shared. Boom, it's out there. Yes, 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 boom, it's out there. And so what we're doing is we're just peeling off layers and layers and layers, and with a brilliant management team that's doing this project, ensuring that we have the highest level of security that's necessary to protect when it's okay for you guys, but not for you guys, that the security system can actually channel the information into the right buckets, right? And so somebody knows how to do that. So this is a couple of slides just to show we're tracking how this is on. I get a weekly report. Now, for some reason, it comes into my mailbox like 2:34 a.m. on Monday morning. So who's up doing this report at 2:30 in the morning? I don't know. In Virginia, well, the governor and some analyst in Izzy's shop are up doing their reports. And so this comes in, and we track on a weekly basis who's using it and why. This is a report that shows number of transactions. So that last one was the number of users. And so we're up to 1,100 users. We piloted it in, I think, 7 program areas in 5 agencies. And the pilot group includes about 6,000 workers. So of those 6,000 workers, we've got 1,100 now that are using it on a regular basis. And we're going to start digging in who's using it and how and why. And then this is the number of transactions. So we're on a monthly basis up to 157,000 transactions. So individual users, it's interesting. So some of the screening and eligibility folks, they're on it constantly, right? Because they're getting those cases opened and processed and moved on to the next desk. And then some of the other workers are never on it. So we just want to understand using it in what way, for what purposes. I'm particularly interested in why ACS has suddenly dropped off. But this just shows the monthly uptake on the Worker Connect. And so our vision moving forward, so we accomplished in the first 4 years the intent of the initial roadmap, and so we decided time to refresh the agenda, and so we just have released our roadmap 2.0 because it's an IT project. The report itself has to be a 2.0. And so the key goals, what we want to do is keep making it more usable and valuable and indispensable to clients and workers. And so we're going to throw more data sources and more users into Worker Connect. We're going to put more online applications into Access NYC, which is the client portal. I want to get to a point where the client manages their own record. And so if you move, that you can actually change the address. And then we have lots of questions. Somebody actually asked me this question about how you handle that. Right now, what we're doing for workers, it's an alert and accept or reject on a change of information. So if you have somebody who's trying to detect on a warrant, trying to detect their get away from the probation officer, and they change their address, the probation officer can decide to accept or reject. Expanding the enterprise case management by building out more and more and more that common case management system. And then the exciting stuff is really now thinking about, rather than individual transactions, how we can start to use this to develop knowledge. And so to help doing things that it's called structured decision making or decisional analytics. But how can we actually now tap into this rich database across multiple service agencies and to start to tell stories about what works and what doesn't work, and how to help clients, caseworkers getting new clients to be guided by some of that history and knowledge. And more, and then social networking tools so that caseworkers can start to work together around those shared clients. And then this last bullet is a doozy. I think it's so the last one, there's a sister project called HHS Accelerator, which is our effort. We have 2,500 nonprofits that contract with the city for $4.5 billion of social services work, and they have something like 8,000 contracts to do that. So what does that average out to be? 3.5 contracts each. And oftentimes it can be 3 different units in one agency, right? And you know this, right? You know it. It's like, so it's submit all your paper in triplicate. I need your 990s in triplicate. I need this, that. So the applications, the scope of services, the proposal itself is 3 pages long. The backup is this. What we're doing is we are creating a master service agreement and a single electronic record for our nonprofit providers so that they put all that stuff into one place, and they have a master service agreement with the city, and so we deal with all the city's legal rigmarole, and then all agencies have to do is talk about services and pull a service agreement off the master service contract. Now, here's the real vision. We're going to plug, connect, and Accelerator together, and the caseworker transaction that gets recorded in Connect is going to flow right through to billing, claiming, and against contract authority. So that's why that last bullet is a doozy. And that one is actually we just got the controller to register the contract for our systems integrator for that. So we're on the way with that project, and Izzy and the Connect team is building it. So this is a slide, and is about how we're structuring the conversation to tap into all of that data. To bring the sort of the research and the knowledge and the analytics to the history to guide our current caseworker decision making, as well as really deepen our research and and analysis. And then I put this last. I thought it was really technical. I'm like, oh, it's like one of these, it's one of these slides that looks like it's an IT slide that is technical, but it really isn't. It's a summary. But I put it last, figuring I didn't understand it, so I just sort of tag it on as an appendix. But it's just a summary of our high-level conceptual architecture. This is really how people work together under this new system. So that's us. I guess I should say a few things. One is what has been really critical in this is a really, really great working relationship, clearly among the agencies, but we have great IT partners. IBM, Accenture, Curem, KPMG have been some of the biggest players in this. And on the one hand, I think we've had excellent management, so that we've had a situation where we've, I think, been good purchasers of service and not been taken to the, what shed do you get taken to when you get, what? Taken to the cleaners. We haven't got taken to the cleaners, and I think the stronger the management, I think it then builds a lot more respect among the team, and they have been really brilliant partners, and have also been. I would say that among those there's more organizations than those, but I think they are actually equal sharers in the vision and are equally committed to the product and the result that we're getting, and so that's been a real asset for us. And I would say that the real thing continuing to motivate us along, that we have to just keep coming back to over and over again, is that common shared vision. And that's the thing that makes everybody sort of put their immediate self-interest a bit to the side, and remember they're doing it because in the long term it's really around achieving that vision of that really holistic approach to serving clients and families in our communities. Thank you.
So we have some time for questions. Why don't we go ahead? Stephanie.
I'm wondering I have two questions. One, hi, is if you've done any evaluation of the impacts, improved outcomes for clients, anything like that.
The Worker Connect was launched last June. So last August, it's recent, 6 months ago, and no, and actually it's interesting because that's clearly some of what we're trying to gather, and we're trying to, at this point, what we're doing is really trying to sit down with the frontline users and ask them more about why they're using it, why aren't they using it. So getting all those those heavy users in one room, what do you like about it, what do you not like about it? Getting the folks who aren't using it, asking them why. So we're very early on. I didn't mention we built as part of this process a net present value tool that actually, for the purpose, the real goal was to get our budget office to give us funding for these different pieces. And so we sort of mapped out, here's all the ultimate benefits that we think we're going to get by developing the shared case management. And so everybody, I'm going to need half of the caseworkers, and everything's going to be 3 times as fast. And we actually costed that out. And so we showed, here, this investment will save these dollars. The ultimate proof in the pudding now is that we can go back and track back and say, okay, you said half, it's fully operational, we're going to take half your caseworkers away from you now, and see what we get out of that. But I think it's part of what we're trying to really build around the accountability for whether or not we're actually maxing out on the use of the tool.
So if I could just follow up on that, how was the original effort funded?
A few different ways. One is that every agency had its own IT budget and had developed its own justification to OMB for replacing various antiquated case management systems. And so we pooled those resources. And at the same time, our citywide IT operation had a portion of money for the human services that were set aside, so we grabbed that money. And then the last piece is that we went to our budget office and said, we're using all those resources now more effectively in this collective way, but it's not enough, and we need you to throw in, with a net present value and a justification, And then we got new resources as well. Izzy just told me earlier that what we've spent so far is $120 million on the capabilities that we've built to date, and the cost for Roadmap 2 is
just
so another $100 million.
Thank you.
Yep. For our situation, what we have done is we've are living off of existing funds that are being used for Medicaid and for social service right now, and for the DMV project that is already up and running and contracted. And we have actually got budget amendments in this year, and it's the one part of my budget that nobody fought us about, is having the match that we need to get the 90%. So we will have that when the rules are in place so that we can draw down the federal matching money. Then we will also, at some point, for us, the trick on using health benefit exchange money is that we have to get through the politics of do we want to actually build one, and will we have to build one, and what will it look like when those rules really aren't out there yet. So we're working in that arena.
Sorry, so if I could follow up. Currently you're using 50% match, and then you've applied under ARA for the 90% match for the incentive fund?
That's close enough, yes. That's close enough. That's essentially what's happening.
Thank you.
Good morning. I just want to talk a little bit more about what's happened in New York, the system that you've described. So I think earlier in the week, some people have talked about, well, the changes, the issues we're talking about is about technology, but it's also really about people. And it's about the way that staff will use the technology, or the way the staff will appreciate it. And I just think that's really interesting part of the conversation that'd be great to hear more about.
In our situation right now, why the people are interested, first of all, the collaborative effort is important. Our CIOs started meeting together within weeks of me coming in. I told you that the agencies weren't meeting. The corollary to that is we started having them meet. And the CIOs have been meeting. And then once we kind of got our act together, we have an organization in Virginia called VITA, which is the Virginia Information Technology Authority, which is set up to provide the hardware, the infrastructure. It never got to the point where they were doing any kind of enterprise application planning. It was kind of in the pipeline, but a couple things happened. VITA struggled, the economy struggled, and we never got to that part. So what has happened, the first thing we had to do was get past the problems everybody was having with the current hardware installation. I even had buttons made up that said that was yesterday. I mean, I don't even want to hear it. It doesn't help at all, and we've renegotiated a new contract with the vendor, or we didn't. The Secretary of Technology did, and so we've had to put the attitudes behind on the infrastructure side. But what we do find, and what Commissioner Martin's back there will tell you in every place he speaks, is we've got people sitting in our social service offices on the floor waiting to be seen while workers are backed up, entering data. It's exactly like Linda says. They do it online, except we type the data in and then we print it off and give it to somebody else. It makes no sense. And so we have people just crying out, we need tools. And so I think what we're finding more and more is that we are getting a consensus across that we need the tools, we need the knowledge to work with, and I think there's a fairly good buy-in right now. And what's even more remarkable is the General Assembly seems to have bought into that. And in Virginia, that's really remarkable.
So I would a couple of things that I think are really important for us. This thing about we have this steering committee of all the commissioners, and I structured it, and I didn't sort of do this initially. I just sort of figured this out a little bit over time, but now I think of it as a really healthy, energetic board of directors. And the principals only rule. It's really, a couple of times they sent a deputy commissioner, and it's really uncomfortable to tell a deputy commissioner, I'm sorry, you can't stay in this room. It's a principals only. If your commissioner isn't here, you can't be here. So I've done that on a couple of occasions. I told them they had to leave. And these are, these are really significant people with really important jobs, and I'm lucky to have them in the room. But the goal of continuing the message to the commissioners that this is important enough that you need to be there, and if you're not there, you won't be represented. And I would take the flip side of that. I sit as a deputy mayor on a citywide IT committee, and they're so respectful of my time that they say I can send my, special assistant. And so, and then it bumps way down. And boy, if it's not so important that I don't need to be there, I guess it's not that important. And so it sets a tone. And then I spend time we get materials to them in advance. We ask them to read the materials, to bring the materials with them. We won't provide a backup at the meeting. So they've got to pay attention to their binder. Yes, we do send it hard copy. And we tell them, bring it with you. And during the meeting, I'll stop. I'll say, this is really important. Pay attention. This is a commitment. It is going to bind your agency for the next 33 million years. Are you sure you agree? And I really want to make sure that they get that they are making critical decisions for their agencies, and that, they don't sort of space out because, they're managing the crisis of the agency. And so that has created a culture in this group of, they give us a hard time. There's been a couple times we had to pull things off the agenda, not allow the vote, and rework it and bring it back. And I think that gets us a better result. And it just continues this buy-in of understanding this is not my project, this is not Izzy's project, this is their project. And I think that's been really critical. Then the last thing, behind that sort of executive management, we have got so many work groups, and it truly is a collective product. Izzy's staff is, how many people do you have working for you? 20? So this is, and I want to, sort of put the 100 million in a context, and 20 people in the context. I mean, the city of New York, my agency's collective budget is $25 billion. I mean, so these are, if you look at it in terms of how big, in tens of thousands of employees, I mean, it's huge. So this is, I don't want to call it modest, because that's silly to call 100 million modest, but it's not $1 billion. I think we've built this on the cheap. We've gotten a really great product for a fairly, I won't say modest.
Yeah. If I could, I think one difference is I suspect the governance of New York City and the way the agencies work and are supervised are different than we have at a state level, at least our state in Virginia. And each of the agency heads in our cases are at-will political appointees, and then they have a classified level of management that's more permanent. So what we have done with the IT discussions is, as we've gotten further down the road the last few months, one is we've had the CIOs meet immediately after the agency heads and have some overlap of the meetings, because I need our business people to understand where the CIOs are agreed, and I think they're bought in. Even the biggest curmudgeon, there's always a curmudgeon in the group, and even their curmudgeons are now on board with the idea that we can align these two enterprises. Bill O'Leary's slide about the intersection between social service and the hierarchy and the medical side is really pertinent to what we're doing. So that's one thing. But what we need to have more than just the agency heads in, because anything that's going to be permanent in a state government's got to get beyond just the political people. And if I just have the political people in, that's not likely to get me very far. So I need them bringing the permanent staff.
Both of you are exemplary leaders, and you've had tremendous vision. And I was struck by the fact that you both began with an epiphany. Your presentation to us began with an epiphany. My question is, when you have the vision that you have, and you have to message it, and you have to bring a lot of people with you to go in the direction that you go, do these personal anecdotes, bringing it down to that level, is that helpful? Do you do that a lot?
Well, I guess you should tell us. I haven't told the story about that suicide. I did it one other time in a very small group. But I think it's obviously an extreme situation, but the mild form of that takes place every day with our clients. And these are really complex people with complex needs. And there's like an inverse relationship of bureaucracy to, we just run them around the block. And we make the situation in a crisis sometimes worse. And it may, and maybe it's one trip on the subway, or maybe it's 10. And it doesn't have to be. So it's just, I don't know. Did it work? Did you think it?
Well, I tell you,
It worked for me.
Yeah, I sure am glad we don't have all those subways in Virginia, but we do have some.
You don't live in the country.
Yeah, no. My sense is absolutely, because you can rationalize, you can explain, you can use reason, and there's a role for that. But people are moved by their hearts. And if I stand up and read slides to you guys and it all makes very good sense, chances are we're not connecting. I mean, chances are you're saying, well, that's a very nice, thorough presentation and all that, but what helps me through a presentation is a connection with the audience. And I get that. And the story about my mom, I mean, it's embarrassing to me, but I still have trouble holding back the tears, and I've told that story hundreds of times. But people, it's a different sense you have with people, and people see emotion and they feel emotion, and you develop the empathy, and I think that allows some credibility in the leadership. And when you explain something like that it does help, and it can help in very large groups. And it's not I'm not using it to manipulate. I'm using it to explain why I'm where I am. And for me, there are a couple things that we do. I'm in a position where I have to make the case for health system reform in Virginia. And automatically, so I'm out making the case for health system reform, and I will make it for you if you'd like me to. It wasn't really the topic today, but the problem is that you would automatically assume we're talking about the PPACA, and I'm thinking at the very delivery form. So using Mom's example is that, and there are a couple others that people just understand, and people understand stories, and you tell. It's stories. Well, you'll remember Mom's story, and you probably won't remember much else that I said.
Go ahead, Don.
Good morning. Linda, I had a question for you, and it could work for you too, Dr. Hazel. But you talked about the NPV, and you talked about caseworker value, right? So many caseworkers at the end in terms of efficiency. You have a pretty strong labor union. Do they realize what's happening with HHS Connect? Are they playing in the same sandbox? And how are those conversations going?
No.
No, they don't know.
Can I tell you the other no? This was driven all by improved quality of casework and frontline practice. It also hands us an extraordinarily powerful fraud detection tool, where we're going to be able to see where resources are inappropriately utilized, and so that's those. So on the first piece around the labor implications. There were actually, those work groups are comprised of members of the union, and some of them wearing their, shop steward hats. It hasn't gotten in the way. I can't tell you exactly why, but it hasn't. And on the second part, I actually intentionally did not lead with. There were no quick wins around fraud management, because I thought that would create a institutional bias against it, and maybe cause its initial failure. I wanted it to continue to be about the real vision on improved case management, and sort of bumped off efforts to extract savings in fraud detection. But it will enable that.
If I could, we have our PERM rates, our Medicaid error eligibility rates are about 16-17% right now, based on what we've been given back from you all. That automatically to the politicians means that we're giving people benefits that they shouldn't be getting, when in fact some means we're giving and others they're not getting. So it's probably a wash economically, but I'm not beyond pointing out that we have an error rate that's unacceptable, and that in Virginia, of course, the hunt for fraud and abuse goes on, eternally, and we take our guns out to go out and get it. But So for us, that is a legitimate concern. Getting it right and creating efficiencies and effectiveness in the process are really strong arguments that sell. As far as using it to replace labor, I think what I've just pointed out and what Martin would say is that it's unlikely that we will use this to replace our people, because we see, first of all, right now our business is counter-cyclical. The economy tanks and our numbers are up, but we see this as preparing the Army we have to be ready for what happens with health system reform. So what we are doing is essentially, hopefully, arming them to be ready for this, whatever's coming with the health reform.
Don.
Hi.
Go ahead, Don.
My name is Don Edwards, Alameda County Social Services. And first, I'd just like to say how impressed I am with what you're doing in New York. I think this is a model that we should all take a real serious look at. My question is about your other intelligence systems at the fire department and the police department. Are you planning on linking all of those together as well?
Oh my God, wouldn't it be great?
She told me those aren't intelligence systems, but that's actually, she didn't say that. That was just.
Can I? One of the things I want to say, just in terms of this, I don't understand what this means, but apparently our system is reusable. And so we are more than eager to talk to other jurisdictions and give away what we can for replication. So maybe you don't have to spend $100 million to redo it. And so anyone who has an interest should let me know, should let Izzy know. I think there's a webinar that's going to be sponsored by the Gary Glickman at OMB, the federal OMB. On this that Izzy's going to conduct, so that just to let people know. But our interest is spreading the wealth, helping other people get to the goal. I don't know if this is how close to the gold standard. I don't know if we're bronze or silver or coal, but it's something more than what we have, right? So that's the first thing. The second. Is the actual answer to your question, which I'm trying hard to remember.
It's fire and police.
Oh, fire and police. Oh, you know what? Here's the thing. When we ask all of those users what they want the school data.
Yeah.
And I am so, FERPA and HIPAA are such huge. So FERPA is the Child Education Confidentiality laws. And I think where I've got them is in agreeing that they can accept all of our data. So they'll plug in order to take all of what I can offer them. And I'm fine starting there. And from there, I expect it might allow some conversations about pieces that they can exchange back. But I just want to get the conversation going. The criminal justice system... I haven't started a conversation.
Mike, first of all, I'm Judge Martin from Chicago, Cook County, and I'm glad that Illinois is in the room so that we can start hearing that it's possible. It's always, if New York and LA can do it, it's possible in Chicago. So that's a good start. When everybody talks about, or when people talk about whether or not it works and whether or not you've been able to evaluate whether it works, we seem to get stuck at the level about whether or not the workers are able to exchange the information and utilize the information across systems. And I think that's great, and I think that's a laudable goal, and that's something that we should look at. But my question really is, as a judge, is whether or not the actual person doesn't have to get on the subway 5 times, whether or not his mother actually gets that gallbladder out sooner without having to have the emergent incident occur. So what I want to know is like what Brian Samuels asked. In Cook County, when we started keeping the kids in the home school, we realized that our kids represent 1% of the Chicago public school system, which is concentrated in the 5 worst performing schools, those red dots. So what I want to know is it better for my kids and families? Do we have less subway rides, and am I getting the gallbladder out without an emergency situation?
Judge, good questions. What I would tell you is that technology is simply a tool. All right, and there are certain things in surgery that we can't do unless we have a tool that does it. But a tool is used to facilitate whatever you're trying to accomplish. So for me to say that IT will get my brother to the proper place quicker, it will help, but only if we have a delivery system that is amenable to that. And I threw in the stories, the comments about HIPAA and liability, and I tossed in a gratuitous comment about the payment system. Because unless we can break up the payment system, and this is something I see in the social service arena as well, if you have a continuum of care, you want the kid to be in the right place at the right time. And the way we see it in Virginia is it's structured such that you can do this or you can do this, and then there are seams in the middle that they fall through. And so the challenge for us on the healthcare side is to restructure the delivery system, which is hard to do because we have a variety of price controls that have been in place now 20 years for physicians, 30 years for hospitals, that really probably doesn't work, doesn't stimulate innovation. And so in Virginia, we're trying to create our own innovation center in between those so that we can break that. Now, the conversation I was having Friday was, do we need to do something like that in social service where we take X amount of the money that we're spending on foster kids or at-risk kids and say, all right, you come to us with another way of approaching this continuum of care, and another way, we'll pay for it differently just to develop the service so then you can prove it works and pay for it a different way. But that judge is not strictly an IT thing. And in Virginia, I mean, we even, it probably would resonate with the group elsewhere, but even from judge to judge, you all do things differently. And the courts are a mystery to some of us on the executive side in terms of how we reach out to you and collaborate when there are potentially walls set up between, so that they're as an independent branch. So those are really hard things that I haven't learned to negotiate yet.
I want to just ask, actually, I want to call on Mary for a second to see if you have a response to that in terms of, are we getting, by putting systems together to respond to Judge Martin's question, are you seeing actual quantitatively improved process or outcome measures? And I asked Mary that, putting her on the spot, because Mary ran Nassau County, which was one of the original no wrong door systems that tried to really put everything under sort of one roof. So if you're...
I would say the answer is that most places aren't measuring it, but it's there, and you can. It's not the technology. The technology is a tool. It's creating the linkages that will use the technology between the departments. And as an example, one of the pieces we set up around staff development was a case of the week piece, where we would talk about cases, and then the component that was very important was not just what they were going to do with that particular case, but what was the systems issue that we needed to change that would make that easier for the client and carry forward. I don't know if I've answered the question.
I could add a little more specific. In medicine, it does work. Okay, there are places, who was Kevin, where are you, was talking about Wisconsin and health information exchange around emergency room visits. And the cost has decreased 20+% by having access to the data right there, because you're getting the history, you're not doing redundant testing, things like that. The information is there. And where you have integrated systems in medicine, the Mayo Clinic, the Geisinger Clinic, which are national models right now that people are looking at for potentially accountable care organizations, there is evidence that having the case file together in coordination of the case improves the care. So I can't speak, I don't know, the professor is over, he says we don't have any research. I think we aren't spending any money on research, but you'll notice our group yesterday said when you have a program, tell us what the outcomes are that you're looking for. Tell us how you think you want it measured, and make that part of the process. Leave some of the process details to us, but tell us what it is you need back.
I think Richard Gellis needs a microphone.
No, I didn't. I anticipated it, sir. That's different.
I was going to ask how you were going to evaluate the New York program and what your mechanism was.
at this point, what we're doing is we're basically tracking utilization. And so, for instance, in ACS, our Child Welfare Agency, where we have the highest level of use, it's being used, the heaviest use is in the intake office. And because we're such a huge volume system, jobs are segmented. And so there's a team of workers that do intake. And what they have to do is they get all of the basic demographics, and what they report. And we have there's 2 slides that I showed on the worker portal. There's another 20 slides that come in that Monday morning report, and one of them is a huge grid that shows what workers are pulling up, what data they're pulling up. And so it's a lot of identification confirmation. And getting those, the birth certificates is what they will say is critical use. The clients are begging them, will you just print out a copy of that for me? So not only are the workers getting it, but they're helping the clients to actually get that backup copy in their records. And it's doing all that initial the client information confirmation. And Judge, maybe this story will help just in terms of thinking about the path. There is part of looking at the initial case opening in a child protective case is you're looking for other family resources that might be turned to prevent the child from going into foster care, and if the child does have to go into foster care, to go toward kin rather than non-kin. And what that intake workers what they are reporting to us is that it is helping them to find non-custodial parents. And so we have circumstances where more often the dad is identified and able to take custody of the children and prevent a protective removal. And it's helping them to find other family members. You have more phone numbers, you have addresses. It's just on the homeless services side, it is identifying addresses where folks have lived, and so in some cases that means that they have no answer about why they can't go back to the apartment that is still in their name on the lease, and so preventing their homelessness in that regard. And in other cases, it is ending the runaround. So ultimately, it's kind of hard to get off of those reports that show that we get 10,000 hits in the document registry for Social Security card and 5,000 hits for leases. It's hard to say what that hit generates without going and actually interviewing the workers and asking them, why did you need it and what was it for? Was it to, and so we're trying to back that up with some qualitative, sort of roundtable discussion. But just maybe I think this is an area where we need to do more and learn more and think about what some of those things are and then be able to really hone in on what we want to report. We're 6 months in. So, so maybe by next year's annual conference there'll be some more reporting on that. But it's
just a comment, a question, and that's very inspiring stuff. And the comment was thinking of some of the discussion yesterday. If you look at where some of the foundations are at, and I'll give an example of the Miami discussion we had, where Elizabeth Mason is at and where Miami-Dade College is at and where in other parts of the country Gates Foundation is at, they are really driving towards measurable outcomes and reporting them out. So I would look to some of that because it's pretty strong. And also what Andy Brickman's doing at the interface of FERPA, HIPAA, and school-based medical homes with very focused measurable outcomes they're working on. But my question is this. We've got 30 new governors, and in most instances, the transition for the governors, meaning when do the staff really kick in, is after their first budget, and in about September, October of this year, most of that settles. So in the meantime, the first 8 months, you have people wondering if they're going to be there or not, and you transition from a campaign staff to a staff running the administration. But this is to you, Secretary Hazel. In Virginia, you have a one-term governor, only state in the country that by statute is a one-term, And as we were talking about earlier, you have a biennial budget, so you inherit the previous governor's budget, and you're just finishing your first budget, and it'll be really the governor's only full budget. And I'm sure that on the time that, because that happens, you're probably tied up for 2 months on just budget this year. And what I want to get at was this. You mentioned that when you came in, very shortly after, you were convening people. That's a different level of urgency. I think urgency is a big question here. Because in many states that won't occur for the people. They haven't even appointed the people yet, and it'll be 6 to 8 months into the governor. What I really wonder is this: how do you accommodate all that? How do you deal with the fact that you're dealing with a 48-month time period, probably 36 before you're in an election mode, and deal with the budget and the political issues as you're driving this agenda?
Good question. When I told you that it's the governor at 2:45, he reads the things. Our administration starts at the top down, and from hour to hour, we are conscious that we're coming up on a hard deadline. I mean, it sounds crazy, and it's an awful way to live, but for hour to hour, we are on a hard deadline. We know we've got about 3 years, because then we become essentially irrelevant as the next campaign. And I tell our folks, actually, in our office, we're not at all going to be irrelevant, because the activity on health system reform is going to be happening then. And so, that's 13 for us. We're here now a year, and it's just something you're aware of. You get up every day and you go to work, Bill, and you're just, you've got timelines, and when you say we're going to do things, we try to get some deadlines on them when we can. And the hard part is the political consensus, because clearly in the area we're dealing with, we had, and the governor, I think, Governor McDonnell ran a campaign on jobs and economic development, transportation, funding for transportation, funding for education, higher ed reform, and government reform. Those were the issues. And in a way, I was fortunate, because did you hear health care or social services in there? No, it's not. And so what I do, it's given us a lot of latitude to fly under the radar a little bit, and that's helped, but it is a real sense of urgency. So what we've had to go out is develop constituencies and do education, and even internally, I think. And I don't know, maybe Commissioner Brown, you might, or Deputy Cobb might have some comment on that, but it is a very intense experience.
The only thing I'd add to that, and you might want to think of this, Dan, you literally will have 25 new secretaries of health by November.
Well, that's the scary part.
So there might be an opportunity to have a discussion, and there is a need to have a discussion about this topic.
Well, at the NGA meetings, I've been there a year, and now I'm one of the senior guys. That's scary. You all should be frightened. Go home, not sleep at night. But that's it.
So let me thank you for your presentation question. I think we could probably go on most of the afternoon. We'll take 2 more questions before I head it off there. But I just wanted to make one point, following up on Judge Martin's question, comment, which you brought forward at the Confidentiality Conference 4 or 5 months ago, which is, okay, how does this work? And I think that the place where we're at right now is actually a really uncomfortable place, because we've gotten past let's go plan to do this, to the point of systems are actually doing it, but they're not there yet. So we're on that sort of very tenuous place of big investments have been made. People have been convinced that this is the right way to go. There's some evidence in medicine. There's some evidence in other places, I'm sure, as well. But we don't really know. We've asked people all over the country, so, where's the beef? And it's coming. And what's interesting, and I think what's probably really valuable about these gatherings, if I must say so, is for people to share those experiences and to sort of keep the faith, to say, let's keep moving forward in the light of the tremendous challenges, the budget challenges, the political turnover, and the ambiguity and the uncertainty of whether or not connecting the boxes and the people and the systems are actually going to deliver what we all believe in our hearts and our minds are going to happen, and that we're right at that precipice. Everyone I've spoken to here today and in preparation for this believes that we're right there. We've got the political support for it. There's the crisis that we're not going to lose, and enough momentum out there and enough people join together to say, yes, we can make this happen. So I think we have to kind of hold our breath, continue to move forward for a while, but be very, very clear not to recreate the wheel. So to take the great work in New York, to take the great work in Virginia, other places, and make sure we're sharing that in a way. And that's some of the work that I think the leadership that Dave Hansel would, if he were here now, would be saying, yes, we're going to do that as best we can, connecting with CMS and FNS and SAMHSA and ONC. All those people together are saying, yes, we can, and we're trying to help sort of move that conversation forward so that we're able to really drive that conversation post today. Tracy's here from APHSA, and we're in conversations about how do we not start the conversation over again every time, but to move it forward and to make sure we're sharing those things so we can continue to accelerate the momentum that we've gotten. So one question from Barbara, and then one final question. We'll take a break for a bit. Yes?
Okay, so on a couple of levels, we've been hearing several times that so much of interoperability moving forward is about people, not just about IT. And now here we've heard a lot of a need. You all now have a lot of information, but we've heard real pressing for evaluation. So it seems to me that we haven't heard a lot about all of your great universities that you have access to. And on both levels, we should be beginning to get that attitude shift in people about data at the university and graduate school level, so that when they come into the field, they already get it about the new way of thinking about sharing information. And then secondly, it's a wonderful source of cheap labor when you want evaluations and things like that done.
Okay, I think sometimes, so in New York we've got so many universities. I think it's been hard, quite frankly. I think that the researchers at universities are interested in longitudinal evaluation that and thank God, extraordinarily rigorous research standards, and that doesn't always have practical application for the day-to-day frontline worker. And I've actually been frustrated by a couple of conversations that I've been in where folks, where I think we have such a huge alliance of interests around getting shared data and allowing more analytics to make us smarter and to add to our collective knowledge. And I've seen actually researchers willing to throw the real-time data exchange overboard in order to get their longitudinal data. And so it's there hasn't always been the kind of alignment of interests that you would expect. I think, and I think on the other hand, New York suffers a little bit from an abundance of riches, and we're big enough to be able to afford a lot of our own in-house capabilities, and so as a result, we're not as dependent on university partners. And so I think we're probably on one end of the spectrum, and I think there's probably a lot of jurisdictions that are much better models for academic government partnerships, sort of born out of necessity.
And in my opinion, I think we should be pushing our great universities, particularly our public universities, to support agencies in the work that they need done, not in doing what they happen to think is important.
Just, if I may, in Virginia, in the Health Reform Initiative, we've had a lot of interest in the universities and a lot of participation. In terms of the, we also will have in the Health Benefit Exchange university representation in terms of helping us get through, and for a lot of reasons, both intellectual and practical, procuring through universities easier than procuring through our state processes. So there are, but I would generally agree with the mayor here that there's not necessarily an alignment of interest around all things. The research part, yes, but the timetables are different. The students come and go, and sometimes we just have to get the work done.
Last question.
Mine's really a shameless plug. I've heard about HHS Connect for a while, and it makes me proud to be a New Yorker and brings tears to my eyes every time I hear about it. But I want to just add to what Linda has said about it, and that in learning about it, I also learned they not only did what they did, but they used NEAM throughout the process. And so they referenced NEAM, they extended NEAM, and so sort of as a lesson going forward, they have laid the groundwork for the use of NEAM in this standardization. So thank you.
And, and that we sort of figured, I'll just say, Daniel, I know you're desperate to move along. We knew that this was going to be really big and across, in terms of the ambition of what we wanted to do for standardization of definitions. I mean, we have all of those problems internal to New York City. And so we knew as part of creating the shared case management and then the sister project on the procurement, even more importantly, perhaps. And so we knew that we had to come up with the standard data definitions, and we actually, because the NEAM conversation was going on at the federal level, and I know it's not new, but it is still nascent. We figured we better to align fully with that. And so learn from, take direction from, and then it appears that the work that we're doing can hopefully contribute well toward it. But again, the idea is that if we can do it and it is transferable, we want to transfer it up and out and over, so we don't want to screw it up for everyone else too. So.